Welcome, everyone. My name is Jacob, and I'm at Bright Data. I am the head of our global pre-sales organization. I'm very happy to have you join our webinar. Today, we have three great browser automation experts for our masterclass on dynamic scraping. Before we begin, some housekeeping notes. At the end, we will have a Q&A, so feel free to start asking the questions in the Q&A section. I think that there might be a button for raising hands. That's not what we're going to be using that for communication, so please put your questions into a Q&A. If it is something that my team can handle during the session, they will answer the question then, and anything else will be left towards the end of the session so that we can cover that. At the end of the session, we'll also send out a quick survey. And as the surveys go, we really value the feedback that you will provide us. That'll help us generate more content like this for both of our customers and people just in the space of dynamic web scraping and data extraction. This will be recorded and shared afterwards. So if you need to get up or leave at any point, feel free. At the end of the session, we will compile it and send it over to you in the short time afterwards. So as we get started, this is a global webinar. We have people from all around the world. So if you have a chance right now, go into our chat room and tell us where you're from so that we can see all the different locations that are joining us for this webinar. I, for example, currently am in Stockholm, Sweden, where I'm doing this webinar. Normally, you'll find me in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area, in California, where I live. But I'm on a little trip out into Europe, and so I'm joining you from there. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our three guests. We have Greg, Dario, and Diego, also from around the world. And I'll let each one of them give a brief introduction about themselves. So let's get started. Greg, if you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Apologize in advance. I have a bit of COVID recovery happening, so my voice might be a little scratchy. I'm Greg. I'm from San Francisco, California. I work at a company called Andela. I'm building a product called Qualified.io. We use it to help companies hire engineers, and I'm a pretty traditional software engineer, but on the side, I like to do a lot of web scraping and testing and participate in StackOverflow, which I know some folks here from. So that's me.
Excellent. Well, we won't make you sing any songs with the COVID voice, so that'll make it a little bit easier.
Great. I can't do that even without COVID.
Excellent. Dario, you're next.
Yeah, well, I'm Dario. I'm based in Argentina. As you can see, it's pretty cold down here. So yeah, I'm work at Mabel. We do low-code QA automation tools. I'm also the author of Puppeteer Sharp, the Puppeteer version of Puppeteer for .NET. And I also help the Playwright team to create the version of Playwright for .NET. So yeah, I'm on both sides. So I love both Puppeteer and Playwright.
Excellent. Thank you for joining. And last, Diego.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me. Greg, you sound great, even like you just recovered. You sound even better than me. I'm Diego. I am joining from Valencia, the south of Spain. I'm Colombian. I moved here a while ago. I wear a few hats in my professional life. I am one of the leads at the Selenium project, but I'm also one of the open source leads at Sauce Labs, cloud testing platform. So that's where most of my expertise about browser automation comes. So I hope you get something valuable from me and from all of us. Thank you.
Thank you all. Now, this webinar is going to be a little bit different probably than other ones. What we're doing is we're doing lightning rounds. So 3 minutes on each topic. Here are the 7 topics that we're going to cover. I'm going to dive into each one of those as I introduce them to you. Now, there's a fun one in the lower right-hand corner, and it's our pop quiz. Now, that one comes in with a nice $200 gift card award for whoever is able to answer the question first. I'll give you a little bit more details on that when we get there, but it is something that, hey, if you stick around, you can answer the question. $200 could be coming your way. So let's get started. And so the first topic we have here is keeping up with HTML changes. So a lot of you guys know that scraping scripts and pipelines, sites change all the time. I talked to some developers on our team that says if your script is 3 months old, it's already the equivalent of 10 years old. So things change all the time. So we'll start out with Greg. Greg, I'm going to send this question over to you. What can we do to reduce maintenance and potential disruptions of our script so that it keeps running longer than as these sites change. And so with that, there is a timer. Go.
All right, sounds good. So the key here is just kind of starting with the basics, choosing reliable selectors. Avoid those like long chains of, hard-coded selectors where it's like div, first child, div, another div, paragraph. If you have that rigid structure, if one of those divs changes, which it very well may, then the whole thing kind of falls apart. So try to pick your selectors with preferably like ARIA label or something like text that's less likely to change. Better yet, avoid the DOM completely and just go to intercepting API requests. If you can pull that data from a JSON format, that's even less likely to change than the DOM. It's going to be faster, more reliable, more stable. So if you can just avoid HTML completely, that's a great strategy. Another option might be to pull data down using more of like a screen scrape kind of text approach. There's something called Mozilla readability. So if you can get your data from a readability formatted version of the page, that's a very predictable structure. It's going to create sort of like a H1 paragraph, H1, H2 kind of structure that's very linear and clean. It removes a lot of that junk you see on many websites like Tailwind classes and all these kind of unscrapable, unmaintainable sort of structures that are everywhere in the web these days. Let's see, what else can I think of in a minute and a half?
It doesn't have to be just you, Dario or Diego.
Yeah,
do you guys have
I'll
anything
pass
to
it
add?
off. I guess that's my initial thought.
Well, I have one extra thing to add, which is, in addition to what Greg said, which all makes sense. So there is a tool in the Selenium WebDriver world, which is very controversial in testing, because in testing you want to actually have your selector to fail to see if the website breaks. But there is something called Selenium, so it's like healing Selenium, and what it does, it grabs the locator and grabs replacements of that locator. So when the locator fails, it tries to check the next ones and balance them and see which one could be replaced instead of the original one. So it tries to heal your script and continue with the execution. So it might be a good thing to try. It's called Selenium, so healing Selenium. It might be useful for web scraping.
Yeah.
Is there a similar one to the other languages for the other two?
Well, it can be used on both sides. On the client side, if you're using Java, but if you're using like a server side, it has to be put in the middle of like between the server and the website. So it has to be either way. Yeah.
Got it. Dario, 2 seconds.
Yeah, and never use XBAT. Never use XBAT.
Never use XBAT. All right. So that's 3 minutes. That was a
Totally
quick one. We got another one now. Navigating client self-routing in SPAs. So single-page applications often use client-side routing, making it difficult to accurately scrape content that changes without a full page reload. Dario, this one's for you. How can we ensure data extraction from SPAs without missing the dynamically loaded content?
So good. So both Puppeteer and Playwright, you have the go-to function that you go to a page and it will the function will resolve, the promise will resolve when the page is ready. The problem with SPA pages is that the page most likely won't be ready when the go-to resolves. So the problem is that for instance, in both Playwright and Puppeteer, you can wait for the page to load, you can wait for the DOM content loaded, or even you can wait for the network idle, but none of those will help you. So I think the first thing that you have to keep in mind is that if the tool, both Playwright and Puppeteer, tells you that the page is done, after navigation, you don't trust that, even with the network idle. Some people say, okay, let's wait for the network idle, to wait for 500 milliseconds. But you shouldn't trust that because, you can't trust the network. You don't know when the page will be ready. So the first thing there is that don't trust first the navigation. And then one thing with the SPA is that you have to see if you are in the right place at the right moment. For instance, one thing that is some complicated, for instance, the Outlook login, that they have many steps and it's a SPA, and every step has a next button. So the main issue I see is that, okay, the button is there, Playwright or Puppeteer tells me that the button is there, so I know that I can click next. But the problem is that you don't know if that next is from the first step or of the second step. So when you are coding SPA application, you have to be like preventive and see, okay, I'm in the right place. So for instance, check the title, check another element. So, okay, I'm in the login. So I type the user and login and click next. But then instead of clicking next again, maybe you have to check the title. I'm saying the title, that's one hint, but you have to be like, have to be cautious to not consider because the element you want to act on is there. It means that that's the element. So that's very important. Another thing is that with these wizards, you don't have a new navigation, but maybe the URL changes. So another good practice is both it's wait for the URL to change. But if the URL changes, don't trust that because maybe the URL changes, but the element is not there or the element is not ready. So in these SPA pages, you have to always double check if you are in the right place and if the element is ready. There are some frameworks that maybe the element is there, but the JavaScript is not initialized yet. So maybe you have to look for hints. I was even sometimes I had to look for some JavaScript inside the button to see if the event was there. So yeah, don't trust the DOM in SPA changes. So see all the context before start acting on that. 3 minutes.
All right. Wow. Well, we are seeing some comments about XPath and such, and I think we're going to touch on that a little bit later as well in more questions. But, we talked about data loading, asynchronous loading data, right? After the initial, this can be challenging. So let's dig into that a little bit. Diego, I'm going to send this one your way. What are your go-to methods for effectively accessing data that loads asynchronously on the page?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is to don't use Selenium, use something built on top of that. There's a bunch of frameworks built with automatic synchronization or automatic waiting that handle most of those things you want to wait for. The big mistake we have done in the Selenium project is to not promote those frameworks, and then many people use Selenium directly, so they have to build their own wait for element to be loaded, wait for element to be visible, and it's just a mess. So when you're doing either testing or web scraping, then if you have to build your own code to identify how the page behaves in some specific elements, then you're going to be investing a lot of time and you don't focus on like following the complete flow of what you want to actually to scrape, right? So my recommendation would be to use things like Selenide in Java, which has a bunch of methods out of the box that help you wait for things. It could be just like an element to not be visible or a checkbox to be not selectable, and you can like just grow from there, right? If you're using JavaScript, WebDriver.io has many things out of the box. So I would recommend to find something that has most of these features already there, so you don't have to write code for the goal you want to achieve.
Excellent. Greg, Dario? I know, Dario, I probably could ask you for filling up the rest of that minute and a half, but I'll go with Greg for one.
Sure. Yeah, mostly got absorbed in the chat there. So stepping back into this headspace. So yeah, like I said before, just taking it to the web request level, intercepting those requests. If you're going to work with the DOM, which oftentimes you need to, just don't sleep. Make sure that you're using a really tight predicate, a focused predicate, something like wait for a response, wait for selector. Wait for function is really underused. You can specify exactly the state that you want to be in before you collect that data. So use event-driven predicates. And locators if you're using Playwright.
Got it. Dario, 40 seconds. What do you got?
No, and yeah, I agree with Greg. If you intercepting requests and even passing through and know that the request has come, it's great. But also you have to play with the DOM. I think I agree with Greg, because one thing is that the request is here, but maybe the JavaScript or the framework will take some time to load. But I think that knowing that the request has come and it's there, I think it's a good hint. But yeah, it can be quite challenging. But yeah, Locator will help you, and yeah, I pretty agree with
All
that.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I did load this a few seconds later, so I'm gonna allow myself to chop off the 2 or 3 seconds on here. And we're going to talk about lazy loading specifically. So, of course, some content only loads when a user interacts with the page, scrolling, clicking, formally pagination. Pagination doesn't work as well here. So we need to interact. So this one's going to go to Greg. Greg, or actually, didn't start. Did it start? Oh, give me a timer. There it is. All right, Greg, what techniques have you found most effective for mimicking user interactions to access this lazily loaded content?
Right. Okay. So kind of in keeping with what I've said so far, try to avoid the DOM if possible. So one thing you can do is use the keyboard page down function, which will work on kind of any site, unless there's a button you have to click to load that thread. If you're on Twitter, for example, and you're paging down, the older data will get cycled out the top. So make sure you're capturing those snapshots of the data as you scroll down the page in chunks. And this also helps for robustness. If your script gets terminated for some reason, you've got at least partial data, and you can kind of debug it a bit easier and see where you left off with that lazy loaded kind of infinite scroll sort of thing. If you're clicking a button, then try to use the text content or the ARIA role of the button rather than, again, those kind of like rigid, brittle selectors. And again, try to avoid user interactions as much as possible. If you're scraping, if you're testing, try to simulate user interactions. You want to kind of do the opposite of scraping generally. You're trying to act like a user, but when you're scraping, it doesn't really matter that you act like a user unless there's, a situation where the site's trying to detect if you're a user and block you. As long as you can kind of get away with it, go ahead and do it. And again, that involves intercepting those requests of the scraping response rather than waiting for it to go to the DOM and then trying to use a bunch of brittle CSS selectors to pull out data from each card or each tweet or whatever it is. Sorry, Twitter, I'm picking on you today. Or YouTube comments or whatever it is, There's also trusted and untrusted events. I feel like trusted events are a little bit overrated in web scraping. The untrusted events don't have the visibility problems and the flakiness of trusted events, which sort of simulate the mouse movement, wait for actionability, and then click. So it's a common thing where many questions will be like, my clicks aren't working. Try an untrusted click to see if you can circumvent that. Again, the caveat there is that if the site's detecting that and blocking you, then you're kind of stuck with the visibility-oriented click. But having some flexibility for forcing clicks and using untrusted events is another way to kind of circumvent some of these issues that happen when you're triggering a lazy loaded feed.
You mentioned something about Twitter and like the older ones are falling off. What about infinite scrolling? Like, how do you handle that?
Right. Yeah, that's pretty common with infinite scrolling. And if I guess pick your bottom, keep going down until you hit a certain number of records or whatever it is that is your stopping point. But I think it's pretty much the same as a non-infinite scroll in every other respect. Just watch out for those items leaving the top so that you're not waiting until you get to the bottom and then you find you've only got 10 records and after paging down for 2 minutes. Doesn't really make sense. By the way, block requests that aren't related to the feed. That'll speed up your scrapes in general.
Got it. All right, another lightning round done. Let's see what's next. Let's talk about accessing data within shadow DOM components. So shadow DOM components may encapsulate parts of the website, making it more complex to access and scrape the contained data. This one's going to Dario. How do you approach extracting information from shadow DOM components? I think you mentioned DOM a little bit earlier, without breaking the scraping process.
Yeah, so there first, one thing that you have to know, I know you have the counter. Yeah, I have the counter. I have the 3 minutes. So the first thing that you have to know is that Shadow DOM can be open or closed. Most of the Shadow DOM components that you see out on the web are open. So, but one example of a closed component is, for instance, the slider that you have in the HTML native slider. It's a Shadow DOM. And if you are able to get into that, you will see that it's a button, it's a line, and there is some action there. But you can, with JavaScript, get to that button. So for you, it's a slider. But most of the components that you will see in the way for designing and for encapsulation are open. So luckily for us, most of the tools, Playwright, Puppeteer, they will what they call pierce the shadow DOM, and that's great because, for instance, if you in Playwright with the locator, you say, "Give me all the images," Playwright or Puppeteer will give you. I think Playwright does a way better job. So let's go to Playwright. They will give you all the images, even inside shadow DOM. But it's important to know that what Playwright does, it's a manual thing. So it goes shadow DOM by shadow DOM and queries and goes, it's recursive. And inside the shadow DOM, you can have another shadow DOM. So, and it will bring and will collect all the elements. So you have to know that although, it's magic or you think that there is no shadow DOM, there is shadow DOM involved there. So why you need to care? Because you have to know how the website you're scraping, it's built. But also, if you are doing JavaScript, so if you need to get information from the DOM manually, you need to know that you won't be able to ask, for instance, the query selector all, or the query selector won't pierce the shadow DOM for you. So in those cases, you have to go manually. So one thing to consider is that if the tool won't help you perform your job, you have to consider shadow DOMs as iframes. So it's pretty much the same. So when you deal with iframes, you have to collect all the iframes and then go to the document, and then you pretty much recursion there. With shadow DOM, it's pretty much the same, but instead of looking for the document of an iframe, you have to use the shadow root property of the element. So if the element, any element, because you don't know, most of the time they have a special tag name, but if the element has a shadow root, it means that there is a document inside. It means that there is more thing inside. So you have to go inside the shadow root, and there you will have your own query selector, or that query selector for that specific context. So know that you're dealing with shadow DOM as you were dealing with iframes.
All right. Another lightning one, and I just wanted to thank everybody who is asking questions in the Q&A. We are getting those, and we're going to be answering those at the end. So sixth one here, ensuring full page screenshots of dynamic content. So of course, capturing full screenshots can be difficult when you're dealing with dynamic content. A lot of times it doesn't fit into a single viewpoint. So sending this one over to Diego. Diego, what methods do you recommend for capturing accurate full page screenshots of highly dynamic websites?
Yeah, this is also a common problem in testing, and I'm learning that it's also a thing in web scraping. So using Firefox is pretty easy because Firefox introduced a while ago a native command to get a complete screenshot of the page. The bit that is complicated is to know, okay, when is the content loaded, right? So the issue there is that you have to mix a waiting strategy, a way to figure out if what you need is there. So you have to wait for something. So I recommend using one of these wrappers in Selenium. And then just take the screenshot, right? And there's also an integration between Selenium and CDP that lets you use the Chrome DevTools protocol to take a full screen screenshot. Thinking about the future, what the Selenium project and the browser vendors are working together is the WebDriver by die standard, which means that I shouldn't be probably saying it like this, but the idea is to standardize CDP in a way that all browsers can work in that way. One of the cool things that is happening already is that Puppeteer already supports WebDriver by die, so you can automate Chrome and Firefox through Puppeteer and use one of those methods that is there to take a full page screenshots, which I think should come in one of the soon-to-come versions of Chrome and Firefox. And eventually, you will do the same in Safari and so on. So those are the methods I recommend. And if you need any help, you can join us in the Selenium Slack channel where all the committers are there to help you.
Got it. Greg, Dario?
There are things that you can also check. For instance, you can check if using JavaScript, if the fonts are loaded. So I don't remember on the top of my head, but there is some function that you can call in the document to say, okay, it's the fonts are ready. Another thing that you can check, it's whether the image in the image elements are loaded. So you can check that. You can check if the image are there. So there is some work that you can do that it's pretty manual, but there is some pieces, for instance, the fonts and the images are things that you can check before taking the screenshot.
Just to elaborate on that, I see network idle being used a lot for screenshots, and it's going to be pretty slow. I recommend doing something similar to what was being mentioned, where you want to check all of these requests, make sure all the requests come in, and then immediately go ahead and take the screenshot, enumerate all the predicates that are required to get that page. I've seen 2x speedups, and I can share an example of doing this.
Excellent. So we talked a lot about scripting. The last point that we actually have here is talking about large-scale operations. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And when you're doing scripting, when you're doing scraping on a small operation, really you're not going to hit these unless there's certain checks in place. But definitely anti-bot technologies out there, blocking technologies out there, and so for people who write scripts, you're not figuring out how to solve this can be difficult. And so I talked with our R&D. We do this on a daily basis for our customers. So this is not an easy task, but it's doable, right? And so the things that we see is these are the different elements that as a person who's scripting, you have to take into account if you're hosting your own infrastructure, right? Making sure that you're handling fingerprints correctly, making sure that you have proper cookies, accessing IP addresses from different geos using proxy services too, if you don't have access to data center IPs around the world. So these are things that I've seen people handle internally, but what I'm seeing more and more is that taking people who are writing the scripts and letting them be experts at that and leaving the infrastructure piece to aside for other companies to handle. And that would be companies like ourselves or others. Our competitors are doing similar things. That just makes your job a lot easier. And so to solve this, what we've done is we launched a product called Scraping Browser. And Scraping Browser we launched about 1.5 years ago. And what this allows you to do is not think about those things. All right, you're focused on writing your crawling and browser interacting scripts. You're putting that information in there. Everything we talked about on the other questions earlier, those imply to what you are writing. But once you're done, you load it into a scraping browser, you run it, and now you don't have to think about session management. You don't have to think about rotating IPs. You don't have to think about those kind of things. And then you just get the output that you want. What's nice about that is recently we launched a playground. And so I'm going to show you a quick video of that. And what the playground is basically our scraping browser infrastructure for you to test on, see if it works. And then if you want to run it at scale, then you can do it ourselves. Or again, if you want to own the backend work for that. And so let me just show you a quick video of that. This is available in your account if you have Bright Data right now within your scraping browser. And you can see on the left side, you have our Puppeteer code. It shows you everything that it's doing. It's going actually to a Amazon site here on the right-hand side. It's searching for laptops. And then what you're going to see in the console is the output of the information that you're getting. So I encourage everybody on this webinar to give that a try. It is something we're very proud of. This playground is relatively new. I think it's only a few weeks or months old. It's new, so give it a go. And again, from our sales side, from my pre-sales team, we're engaging nonstop with developers who are using this because it is something that allows you not to worry about infrastructure, allows you to focus on what you know best, which is writing the scripting language for gathering the data that you need to get. So with that, we are now moving into Pop Quiz Zone. So again, $200 is on the table. Now, one thing I want to mention is that Zoom does allow you to ask questions in anonymous mode. Unfortunately, I don't know who you are if you answer the question in anonymous mode. So that $200 will be flying around in Never Never Land until I look at the next answer that was correctly answered, and then I get that answer. So please, if you're going to answer this question and you're going to participate in the pop quiz, please put your name and the answers there. And then my team is reviewing it. And as the answer comes in, they're going to let me know. And then we're going to let you guys know what the answer is, announce a winner, and then we'll move on to the Q&A section. So without further ado, what is the question? Some websites use dynamic classes that change frequently. This can make scaling data extraction very difficult. How can we keep our scrapers from breaking and parse effectively? I'm giving it a few seconds. We may have answered this earlier in the session. I'm not going to say yes or no, but there might have been answers earlier. But go ahead and put that in there. And I'm now checking with my team to see if we have a proper answer. The suspense. It always kills people. All right. As we go through with that one, I'm actually going to check back with the team as we're going through the Q&A, but we do have questions, so I wanted to jump into the Q&A. Again, the first answer that's correct with the name, once I get that notified, I will let you guys know, but let's jump into the Q&A. And so first question here. Any tips on intercepting front-end API calls and managing basic authentication authorization flows? Who wants to tackle that one?
I think I responded in chat, so just to elaborate on that, and anyone else feel free to jump in, but sort of two different things. The front-end requesting, get comfortable with the network tab and search for your data in there. Once you find the request, there's so many possibilities, so you kind of have to be adaptable. Web scraping has few silver bullets in general, so you sort of have to think on your toes and deal with things on a case-by-case basis. But first thing you can do is just try hitting that endpoint directly from Node or generic Python. In many cases, you can just get that data without even automating the site if it's an unprotected endpoint. If it's protected, you might need to simulate that request by clicking a button and then intercepting the response using wait for response, for example, in Playwright and Puppeteer, or page.on response in some cases. And for authentication, it's going to be a matter of dealing with it on a case-by-case basis. Again, if it's two-factor authentication, you might have to do it by hand, but then you can cache that in the user data dir, which Chromium supports, and that will avoid having to do it repeatedly. You might just need to do it once a week or something by hand if it's two-factor auth. If it's a programmatic auth, again, cache the data so you don't have to repeatedly do it, but every site's different, so it's not really a one-size-fits-all answer. You kind of have to think on your toes a lot.
Yeah, and also, well, in both Puppeteer Playwright, you can set up in when a basic auth it's requested, you can set up, okay, use this user and password, and the browser will solve that for you. But I think also the trick will be to be as close as the user interaction. So I think it depends on. I wouldn't. So you can patch, for instance, the request. I was thinking about that. So you can intercept every request and patch and add your basic interaction. But I will try to see how you can emulate how the real user will use the website.
All right.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you both, because what I have seen is that people are afraid of messing with the network, right? So I think what Greg has said during the whole webinar, like, you should all take it into account, because this is the same situation with Selenium users. They like to interact with the website, but when they want to have a definite state or like a static state of the website to do something, so pay attention to the network. And for example, there are many things like I don't know, Google Analytics or other things that you just can't block, and then you can do your scraping in an easier way.
All right, thank you for that. Next question: how to write a robust XPaths without failing in future?
Don't write XPaths.
Just don't. Yeah. Well, if you can.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and if you use Playwright, for instance, learn all the locators that are available. There are tons of locators, and even you can, for instance, get a locator by text and then go to the parent. So there are many things that you can solve without getting to use XPath. Don't use XPath, please.
All right. Any thoughts on if there will ever be a standardized way to bundle up the complete HTML and tools like Puppeteer and Selenium that could be archivable, similar to what can be done with MHTML, with dynamic SPA pages? We've had to use scripts to try and collect this information after crawling, but not always 100%.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so because
Yeah.
like I think we have also tried to communicate this during the session that I mean every website is different and like you have to learn how the website behaves. So there cannot be a standardized way to just grab the whole blob and like save it somewhere. So you have to deal in case by case and figure out if something changes, how to adapt. So I mean, in short, that's it. I don't think there is a way to do that because every single website has something different. So you cannot like have one size fits all for these things.
And it's getting more complicated because now you have local storage. Now you can have your local DB, and now with Google you can even have AI running locally. So I think that trying to download an entire website, it's getting more and more difficult.
And depending on the location, the website might show something different. Like depending, yeah, you never know.
All right, next one. Any automated manner of intercepting the calls and better searching for auth tokens creation logic or better handling SPA interaction, kind of like Burp Suite, but aimed more towards scraping? And if
Could
we
you,
stopped our panel, I don't
No
know.
idea.
what's
No
what's
idea.
Burp Suite? I'm not too familiar with that.
Question has been asked. Well,
I guess there's
I'll
no
let
way
the
for people to
yeah,
respond to
I'll
that,
let
but
the whoever was asking that question, if you wanted to elaborate that in the chat, the team can put that question back in here with a little bit more details. All right,
and I can Google it, but just
yeah.
to respond to your main point, though,
Mhm.
I feel like just kind of doing it by hand generally, because every page is different. It's hard to automate things. Ironically, in browser automation, where you have this, one weird trick that will intercept any request. It's just really hard to find that. Usually, just kind of have to dig in and sort of do it the hard way generally.
Yeah, because also, I mean, most of the auth tokens, they are not very long-lived. Like then you have to do it all over again. So it's like I was thinking if that makes sense to how long do you have to store an auth token? Like, yeah, I was.
All right. So we use
I'll look into
scraping.
Burp Suite though. That seems pretty interesting. So thanks for that recommendation.
All right. Thank you, listeners or viewers. We use scraping for various websites without knowing the DOM, and we take the HTML of the loaded pages. It was said that trusting network idle isn't the best approach to identifying the page is fully loaded. Any recommendations on a better way in this case where we can't check for any specific elements since we don't know what they will be?
So my thought there is that there must be something. So maybe it's not clear, but yeah, I don't know. But I know that sounds stupid, but there. So because of that my approach, maybe I know I'm dumb, but there must be. So when I find that, so it's not possible that everything in the page is dynamic. Must be something that it's clearly a hint that the page it's ready. And I think you end up, but maybe you have to go to the DOM and see and try to think, but there is always something. And even, for instance, with the example that you gave, that the class are dynamics. And maybe if you come from the times where the only way to get an element was with XPath or with CSS classes, yeah, maybe you are lost. But with the new selectors, you say, okay, there's might be some text that I can use with the text selector or with an area role. So I think the more you know how the features of your frameworks have, for instance, and even what Greg mentioned about wait for function, you can even write a JavaScript function that will tell you something about something it's ready or no, and Playwright or Puppeteer will pull that function till that function it's true. But if you look by text, a title, or by an area role or something there tends to be sometimes take more time than others, but there is always something that it's stable that will give you some hint.
One
All right.
one thing to elaborate on that is there really are kind of two situations. There's a situation where you're scraping one site and you can pick really tight predicate and everything's really beautiful. And then there's the other situation where you want to scrape any page, and then like all bets are off at that point. It's going to be really hard to find something that'll work for everything. Like I said, there's no silver bullet in web scraping. However, one thing that was mentioned in the Q&A, which I think is good and worth highlighting, is you can do some things that might work for your particular domain. If you can narrow down that subset of sites to something like, say, text stability, where you snapshot the text content of the page every 50 milliseconds or something, and then I don't know, if you wait like a second, sort of similar to network idle, but for the text content of the page, then you could say, okay, it's time to take that snapshot. And when you take that snapshot, consider putting it into Mozilla readability, which will convert it to Markdown. Well, actually, readability will be HTML, but then you can convert that to Markdown in an additional step, which is really useful for a lot of those AI scrapes that are happening now for retrieval, augmented generation, those RAG apps, but also just for a lot of text extraction in general. So that's one kind of way to sort of like scrape any page. But yeah, you got to pick some kind of restrictions really and figure out where your boundaries are. Do the best you can to find those cut points.
And we're almost at the end, so I got one last question here. And I think we talked a little bit about this, so it might be a repeat, but do we have any mechanisms to trigger lazy loading of all content on the page without any user interactions like clicking, scrolling, and etc.? Because I remember down button, but that's still in a user interaction. So
yeah, I'd say I haven't seen any. Many of these functions, like if they could be written, surely Playwright and Puppeteer would give them. Like the scrape any web page function would be amazing. Would cut out the whole API, and we just have that one silver bullet that would handle all user interactions. And you could go and fire all event listeners, but it's not going to be trusted. They might not trigger right. There's just a lot of sort of issues I can see with creating that function. By the way, another thing that comes up a lot nowadays is AI. So if you can ask an AI, hey, can you automate this page or extract text? There's going to be a lot of reliability issues with there. I don't think it's a solved problem, but there is some potential for a more general purpose scrape using an AI tool in the future. So I kind of watch it, but I'm pretty skeptical. Yeah.
Yeah, another thing that you can also do, but you have to know how the website's built or what they're using, is maybe changing the feature check that they are using on the browser. So sometimes they say, okay, if this browser supports this feature, I will go this way, and if this browser doesn't support this feature, I will just render everything. So maybe you can like force that value to true or to false or to undefined. But again, you have to know maybe what's the framework they're using or what's the check. So maybe you have to dig into the JavaScript that they are using. But sometimes I've seen people like, okay, let's emulate that this is an Internet Explorer 3, and so it renders everything at once, some stuff like that. But it's, yeah, you have to know what's the page is using to render data.
got it. Well, I'd like to thank the panel here. Greg, Dario, Diego, you guys have been excellent here. I know this was a lightning round, a lot of information that we covered into it. I did get a ping from the team. They are reviewing the answers, so we will reach out to the winner. There's been some creative solutions to our questions, so we are making sure that they are correct, and we will reach out to whomever is the winner for that. My name is Jacob Glodek again. I run pre-sales. My email is jacobg@brightdata.com if you want to have any feedback for these sessions or any future webinars that maybe that you would be interested in hearing in the web data abstraction space. Again, thank you to the panel. There will be a survey after this, so I appreciate if everybody filled that out. But that is the top of the hour. I don't want to take too much time more from people. So thank you again, and have a wonderful day.